You are awake before the phone even rings. It is always exactly the same. Your internal clock is permanently broken, shattered beyond repair by years of living across a dozen different time zones, none of which truly belong to you anymore. The digital clock on your nightstand glows with an aggressive red hue in the pitch-black bedroom of your high-security London apartment. It reads 3:14 a.m. You are staring blankly at the ceiling, listening to the muffled, distant hum of the city traffic outside, but your mind is thousands of miles away, wandering through humid, mosquito-infested jungles and damp, concrete basements. Then, the encrypted satellite phone resting on your mahogany desk begins to vibrate. It does not ring with a cheerful melodic tune. Instead, it emits a sharp, low-frequency buzz that vibrates straight through the heavy wood and resonates deep inside your bones. This is the sound of a human life hanging by a frayed, unpredictable thread. You do not jump. You do not panic. You simply close your eyes for a fraction of a second, silently mourning the very last moments of genuine peace you will have for the next 6 to 8 months. You push back the heavy-down comforter, the artificially cooled air of your luxury apartment biting at your bare skin. It is a stark, almost offensive contrast to the sweltering, fly-infested room where your newest client is currently bleeding and terrified. You pour yourself a glass of cold water, take a deeply calculated breath to slow your heart rate, and press the green button to connect the encrypted line. You do not say hello. You do not offer greetings. You say, with absolute deadpan neutrality, I am listening. And just like that, with 3 simple words, you are violently pulled back into the abyss. You are a hostage negotiator. You buy people back from monsters. And God help you, you are remarkably good at it. There is a profound and dangerous misconception in the civilian world about what it is that you actually do. Hollywood movies paint this specific job as a high-octane thrill ride filled with intense shouting matches, ticking time bombs, and dramatic, explosive rescues orchestrated by elite special forces rappelling from black helicopters. The reality of your existence is far more bureaucratic and infinitely more depressing. You are, in essence, a glorified accountant operating in the darkest, most unregulated economy on Earth. The core commodity is human flesh. The primary currency is terror. You work for an ultra-exclusive private crisis management firm, the kind that is kept on permanent, exorbitant retainer by multinational oil conglomerates, aggressive global mining corporations, and ultra-wealthy dynastic families who purchase kidnap and ransom insurance exactly like it is a premium car warranty. When a senior geological surveyor gets snatched by a militant faction while mapping terrain in the Sahel, or when a shipping executive is violently pulled off his private yacht in the lawless waters of the Gulf of Guinea, the local police are never called. The international military forces are not alerted. You are called. You sit at your reinforced desk, bathed in the pale blue light of 3 oversized monitors, complex financial spreadsheets, deep-dive psychological profiles of warlords, and highly detailed topographical maps fill your screens. You operate exclusively in a world defined by cold, hard numbers and risk assessment algorithms. Every single human being on this planet has a specific price tag. It is your specific job to figure out exactly what that price is, and then systematically, ruthlessly, talk the kidnappers down until they agree to accept it. Doing this effectively requires a level of profound emotional detachment that most normal people would find genuinely sociopathic. When the desperate, grieving mother of a hostage is sobbing uncontrollably in the plush conference room next door, begging you to just pay whatever astronomical sum the captors want, you cannot let her tears move you. If you show weakness, if you pay the initial demand out of pity, you instantly doom the next target. You inflate the global market rate for human beings. You actively teach the terrorist networks that kidnapping is a highly lucrative, low-risk, high-yield investment strategy. The men on the other side of the satellite line are rarely the unhinged, screaming religious zealots the mainstream media portrays them to be. They are ruthlessly pragmatic. They are the middle managers operating within a sprawling, highly organized, and exceptionally violent corporate structure. They need the $10 million not just to make a radical political statement, but to practically fund their ongoing insurgency, to purchase black market surveillance drones, to pay the monthly salaries of their young foot soldiers, and to systematically bribe local government officials. When you speak to them, you are essentially speaking to the chief financial officer of a terror cell. You have learned over the years to recognize the incredibly subtle shifts in their vocal tone, the slight pauses that indicate they are consulting with a superior. The satellite connection is almost always terrible, filled with harsh static, the distant whining sound of cheap motorcycles, or the terrifyingly mundane, surreal noise of a daytime television show playing loudly in the background while a man's life is debated. As a woman navigating this deeply misogynistic and brutally patriarchal underworld, your gender serves as both a strategic weapon and a dangerous liability. The men you negotiate with, hardened warlords, ruthless cartel bosses, and ideological terrorist commanders, almost always start the dialogue by entirely dismissing you. They aggressively demand to speak to a man. They throw vile insults. They attempt to utilize cheap psychological intimidation tactics that rely entirely on archaic concepts of patriarchal dominance. But you have meticulously learned how to turn this exact dynamic against them. You deliberately let them underestimate your intelligence. You keep your vocal register entirely flat, completely devoid of anger, fear, or frustration. You transform yourself into a psychological mirror, reflecting their raw, chaotic aggression back at them as absolute, crushing boredom. Your profound silence makes them deeply uncomfortable. Your unyielding, almost robotic adherence to the negotiation protocol breaks their established rhythm. When they inevitably scream into the receiver that they will begin systematically sending you the hostage's severed fingers in the mail, you calmly, analytically reply that a physically damaged product significantly lowers the final ransom value, and you politely ask if they are finally ready to discuss the mandatory proof of life questions. The proof of life phase is where the true, grinding psychological warfare actually begins. You can never, ever ask a question that is easily verifiable. Asking, "What is your mother's maiden name?" is entirely useless. They can simply beat that information out of the terrified hostage or easily find it by scraping their digital footprint on social media. You must dig deeply into the most intimate, obscure, and highly protected corners of the hostage's mind. You are forced to sit down with their traumatized family members and ask brutally invasive questions. What exactly did he accidentally swallow when he was 6 years old? What is the highly specific, embarrassing secret nickname he only calls his wife when nobody else is around? When the terrorist commander eventually relays the correct answer back to you through the crackling static of the satellite phone, a chilling, deeply unnatural intimacy is instantly established. For a brief, horrifying second, you, the violent monster, and the helpless victim are all intrinsically connected by a shared, deeply personal secret. It is a sickening, invisible bond that makes you want to scrub your skin until it bleeds. But the sterile machinery of the negotiation process only protects your sanity until the exact moment it abruptly doesn't. You constantly tell yourself that you are perfectly safe sitting in your fortified glass tower in central London, separated from the visceral violence by vast oceans, heavily armed security guards, and impenetrable encrypted firewalls. You tell yourself that you are the one holding the strings, the one in absolute control of the narrative. That fragile, comforting illusion shatters completely and irrevocably during the Beirut assignment. It was originally supposed to be a highly standard, unremarkable corporate retrieval operation. 2 senior telecommunications engineers had been violently abducted from their convoy by a newly formed splinter faction of a very well-known, highly organized militant group. You had rapidly established reliable contact. The lead negotiator on the other side of the line calmly introduced himself as Tariq. From the very first syllable, Tariq was entirely different from the usual thugs you dealt with. He spoke impeccable, flawless, Oxford-educated English. He did not yell. He did not make grandiose, sweeping political speeches or quote religious texts. He spoke directly to you with the polite, measured tone of a grandmaster chess opponent discussing a particularly interesting and challenging match over a cup of warm tea. The grueling negotiations drag on for 32 agonizing days. You are sleeping perhaps 2 hours a night, surviving purely on adrenaline and prescription stimulants. Your coffee tastes like cold ash. The complex financial spreadsheets begin to violently blur together on your monitors, but you feel certain that you are slowly wearing Tariq down. Through meticulous psychological pressure, you have successfully moved his initial demand from an impossible $20 million down to a workable $3 million. The complex, multi-layered logistics for the physical cash drop are actively being coordinated through underground Hawala networks. You feel the familiar, hollow, deeply exhausting sense of impending professional victory. Then, precisely on day 33, Tariq calls the encrypted line. You answer immediately, expecting to finally confirm the specific GPS coordinates for the designated cash courier. "Good evening to you," Tariq says, his smooth voice transmitting perfectly clear over the digital line. "I sincerely hope the autumn weather in London is treating you well tonight. It has been raining quite heavily in your specific neighborhood, hasn't it? Your blood runs entirely cold, freezing in your veins." The expensive silver pen slips from your trembling fingers, clattering loudly against the mahogany desk. You absolutely do not live in a neighborhood that makes international news broadcasts for its daily weather patterns. "I am sorry, I do not know what you mean," you say, forcing your voice to remain perfectly steady despite the sudden, violent, deafening hammering of your heart against your ribs. "Oh, I am quite certain you do," Tariq murmurs gently, almost affectionately. He then calmly recites your full legal name, not your carefully constructed operational alias, your actual birth name. Then, without pausing for breath, he recites your highly classified home address, including the apartment number. He casually mentions the specific artisan brand of coffee you purchase every single morning from the small, door-independent cafe on the corner of your street. You have truly beautiful taste in modern art, by the way. I highly admire the new, vibrant painting you recently hung in your living room. My associates noticed it through the window. It brings a tremendous amount of warmth to the space. The reinforced walls of your highly secure corporate office suddenly feel as though they are violently closing in on you. The filtered air conditioning is suddenly entirely too thin to breathe. The violent underworld you thought you were merely managing has reached out across the globe and placed a cold, heavy hand directly on your shoulder. You are abruptly no longer the invisible, untouchable hand guiding the dark market. You have been violently dragged onto the board as an active playing piece. "What exactly do you want, Tariq?" you ask. It's completely abandoning the strict, company-mandated protocol. "The fundamental price of our transaction has changed," he says with a soft, chilling smile that you can practically hear through the receiver. "We are no longer discussing $3 million. We are now discussing $5 million, and unfortunately, I am no longer returning 2 of your engineers. I am only returning 1. You get the distinct privilege of choosing exactly who lives. The other man will be brutally executed on a high-definition livestream in exactly 1 hour. If you disconnect this call, they both die immediately. If you stubbornly refuse to make a choice, they both die. If you attempt to call the British authorities, my very capable friends currently waiting in London will pay you a highly personal visit tonight. Make your choice. This is the ultimate trap. This is the absolute psychological breaking point they never prepare you for in the corporate training seminars. This is the exact moment the bottomless abyss finally stares back at you and smiles. The heavy, suffocating silence stretches agonizingly over the encrypted satellite link. Your shaking hands pull up the digital files of the 2 captive men. One is 24 years old, newly married, and his young wife is currently 6 months pregnant. The other man is 56 years old, a dedicated father of 3 teenage children, and the absolute sole financial provider for his entire extended family back home. How do you possibly weigh the intrinsic value of their souls? What specific mathematical algorithm, what soulless spreadsheet, what corporate risk assessment matrix helps you successfully play God? You desperately try to negotiate. You frantically offer $6 million for both men. You offer to entirely double the initial financial demand. Tariq simply sighs, sounding genuinely disappointed in your lack of comprehension. You are clearly not listening to the new rules of the game. The primary currency right now is no longer money. The currency is psychological pain. You have exactly 50 minutes left. The paranoia that consumes you is absolute and entirely paralyzing. You stare blindly at the reinforced window of your office, terrified, wondering if there is a trained sniper lying prone on the opposite roof, wondering if the friendly young man who poured your artisan coffee this morning was actually one of Tariq's embedded sleeper assets. You are utterly, completely isolated. The massive, multi-billion-dollar corporation you work for will absolutely not help you make this horrific choice. They will instantly legally disavow you if this situation ever goes public to protect their stock price. You are entirely alone in the dark, locked in a digital room with a highly educated monster who currently holds all of the cards. You spend the next 45 minutes desperately begging, logically rationalizing, aggressively threatening, and tearfully pleading. Tariq remains entirely immovable, a stone wall of polite cruelty. With exactly 2 minutes left on the clock, the 56-year-old man's tired face burns permanently into your retinas from his digital file. The 24-year-old's wife's tearful begging plea from last week echoes deafeningly in your ears. You make the impossible choice, your voice cracking. Albert, you speak the name into the receiver, the name of the man who will be allowed to live. Excellent choice, Tariq says, sounding genuinely pleased and thoroughly entertained. The chosen asset will be released at the previously designated coordinates within the hour. Thank you so much for your continued business. It has been an absolute pleasure. The line goes dead with a sharp click. The surviving engineer is physically recovered by a private security team 2 days later, heavily battered, deeply malnourished, but breathing. The other man is sent directly to the company server in an encrypted, high-definition digital video file that you absolutely never open, but that constantly plays on an endless, looping projection inside your worst nightmares. The corporation highly praises your exceptional work. You successfully retrieved a valuable company asset and managed to keep the final ransom payment well under the maximum insured threshold. You receive a substantial, highly lucrative financial bonus deposited quietly into your offshore account. But inside, you are nothing but a hollow ghost. You move out of your beautiful apartment that exact same night, leaving all of your expensive furniture behind. You hire a private, armed security detail that you can barely afford to maintain, systematically sweeping your new, bleak flat for electronic listening devices every single week. You completely stop going to local cafes. You stop opening the blinds to let the sunlight in. You live in a permanent, exhausting state of hypervigilance, obsessively analyzing the gait, the posture, and the eye contact of every single person who walks past you on the gray London streets, constantly looking for the telltale heavy bulge of a concealed weapon under their jackets. You finally realize the fundamental, horrifying, inescapable truth of the criminal underworld. You absolutely cannot touch pitch without getting permanently stained by it. You arrogantly thought you were outsmarting the pervasive darkness, neatly managing it from safely behind a sterile corporate desk. But the darkness wasn't being managed. It was simply learning your scent, studying your habits, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Every single massive ransom you successfully paid out over the years directly funded the sophisticated terror network that eventually tracked you down and broke your mind. You meticulously built the very machine that ultimately crushed your soul. You look in the bathroom mirror now, under the harsh, flickering fluorescent lights, and you do not see a master corporate negotiator anymore. You see a willing collaborator. You see someone who casually put a precise financial price tag on a human soul and paid the remaining balance with a massive, unrecoverable piece of her own fundamental humanity. The heavy black satellite phone on your new, cheap desk sits there, looking like a dark monolith. It is completely silent, waiting. You know with absolute certainty that it will eventually ring again. And you know, may God have mercy on you, that you will inevitably answer it, because the normal world is gone forever, and you have absolutely nowhere else left to go. You belong entirely to the underworld now. That's all for today. The story you just heard is fiction, but the reality of high-stakes corporate hostage negotiation and international ransom economies happens every day. If this story made you think, leave a comment telling us your biggest takeaway. Subscribe so you don't miss the next stories from the underworld. Until next time.